You're listening to Travel Agent Chatter, Volume 33. Travel Agent Chatter is an audio series produced by the team here at Host Agency Reviews each and every quarter. And sometimes they're late, like this quarter. So thank you for your patience. Now, today we are diving into one of the most uniquely branded agencies that I have ever come across. Picture this: a black tent with gold dragons, a white Jeep with fantasy branding, dragon on the hood, driving to Renaissance fairs, and an entrepreneur who has turned his Lord of the Rings obsession into a thriving business. Our guest went full-time after his military retirement, and he chose a business name by surveying his Dungeons and Dragons community. He has almost hit double digits New Zealand Lord of the Rings themed trips within just 20 months of getting started. And during that time, he's also mastered, or is working on mastering, the art of vendor events. He has turned $35 investments into multiple five-figure bookings, and he has built some key partnerships with companies with the same clientele as him, like map makers and IV therapy businesses. But here's what I love most about Rocky's story. So he is not just building a travel agency, he is building a fantasy travel empire with dreams of brick and mortar shops in downtown areas across the country. So keep your eye out for those. Today, you're going to walk away with concrete steps to find new ways to market at vendor events and to find the best vendor events for you. You're going to learn about partnership development, community building, and the courage to brand fearlessly around your passion. Now, a quick note on the horror news front. If you loved Host Week, boy, do we ever have exciting news for you. Mark your calendars for October 14th through the 17th for HAR's inaugural Tech Week. Please add clapping, like people are really excited for the audio person. That's right. With our new travel agency tech profiles and the reviews on our site, we thought it would be the perfect time to put on a virtual event that is going to have software demos. It's going to have education focused on the tech that you need to run your agency. And of course, as always, we will be throwing in some horror shenanigans as well. And if you have never heard of Host Week when I mentioned it, well, now you have. So it is our annual event, the last week in January every year. It's full of education, host and consortia interviews, and loads of fun. Both events are free, so make sure that you follow the link in the show notes to register for both Tech Week and Host Week. You can find that by going to hostagencyreviews.com/TAC and clicking on episode 33. All right, it is time for you to grab your favorite fantasy novel, a notebook for all the great information, and let's get on to the show. Welcome back, travel entrepreneurs. I am Steph Lee, the founder of Host Agency Reviews, and I'm so glad you're here with me today. I am beyond excited about today's guest, who is Rocky Dimico, the founder of Flights and Fables. Friends, his agency is branding done right. Now, Rocky pretty much went full-time from day one after he went on a life-changing trip, bucket list trip to New Zealand that sparked his aha moment. I want to start a travel agency. But this just isn't another niche story, although it's that as well. It is a masterclass in building a brand that people cannot ignore, even if they want to, because it's not every day, at least for me, that you see a travel advisor dressed as a wizard, setting up a booth where those lucky enough to sign up for his newsletter list get to do so with a Harry Potter wand. It just doesn't happen. So Flights and Fables is close to selling double-digit Lord of the Ring themed trips to New Zealand. He has expanded into anime/samurai/Japan travel, and he has started to set up and booking his first escorted group trips. And all of this is in just under 20 months. Another thing to mention is his vendor event strategy alone has generated multiple five-figure bookings from investments as low as $35. Now, there have been some flops in there too, and we'll talk about those and how you can avoid those and make sure that the events that you're going to work best for your agency. But Rocky's approach to partnerships, networking, and community building has something that every entrepreneur can borrow or steal. So we're talking about his Chamber of Commerce connections that led to 4 different media articles about him and his agency, to the creative partnerships that he's formed with people that have similar or the same audience. Things like map makers or the IV therapy business that helps people with jet lag, to the New Zealand destination photographer. And we also hear about how he found a mentor to advise as his travel business grew. So whether you're looking for information on niche development, we've got that. If you want to know what fearless branding looks like, or just want to see Rocky dressed as a wizard, we've got that for you. Or if you need ideas for finding clients through in-person events, because that's where you excel, we've got that. This episode is really going to knock your socks off. Plus, we get to stick around and hear about Rocky's big dreams for brick and mortar or storefront fantasy travel shops in downtown areas across the country. All of the links and resources from today's show can be found in the show notes, which you can find by going to hostagencyreviews.com/TAC, clicking on episode 33. Now, today's roadmap is we're going to talk about beginnings. How did Rocky get started? We're going to talk about how he decided to go full time. Then we'll talk about client acquisitions, the psychology of entrepreneurship and what to do when you make those mistakes. We'll talk about the partnerships and media. We'll talk about how he plans to scale and how he is scaling. And then we'll wrap things up with our usual last segment, which is indispensable. So Rocky, welcome to Travel Agent Chatter.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Oh, so excited to have you here. I hope those of you that are listening on audio have time to drop by our YouTube channel or going to hostagencyreviews.com/TAC and clicking on episode 33, because Rocky's got a really fun background and it kind of goes with the whole theme we're going to be talking about. So I want to jump right in because we've got a lot to talk about today. So let's paint a picture of your background for everybody who hasn't had the pleasure of meeting you. And I want to talk about how that kind of played into where you are today, the owner of Flights and Fables. So go ahead and tell me where your love of travel started and how you ended up going from the military into travel advising.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for asking. It started with, growing up in a military family. My dad was a Marine. My mom was a Marine for a little bit. From an early age, we just traveled. We started out, different parts of the country, but then very quickly, I was going to elementary school in Yemen, Sana'a, Yemen, back when it was, North and South Yemen before they were unified. And then from there, we went to Helsinki, Finland for a couple of years. And so I did some more education, some more of my early on years there. Like I tell a lot of people, like my first beach experience was the Red Sea, and my first time seeing animals in real life was on safari in Kenya, because my dad made sure that like we weren't just going to be stationed there, we were going to be out experiencing things. So, traveling through Europe, traveling through, Africa and the Middle East, when we lived there, you get back to the States and, the first time you go to a zoo after having been on safari, you're like, this is a little bit of a letdown. And, so, we moved all over the place. We ended up settling down. My dad retired in Washington State. And so 2 short years later, I graduated from high school and I was like, I too am going to go this route. And I decided to join the Army instead. And before I knew it, I was already in Germany, all throughout the Middle East. I was stationed in Europe for quite a bit of my time. So I've got to go a number of places in Europe. And that's where I think the bug really took off a little bit, was you would get a lot of 4-day weekends there. And so you would just kind of use different apps. And a lot of the people who I served with were like, hey, just find out where Rocky's going this weekend, because he always knows the hot spot to go. So you're in Budapest, you're in Prague, you're in wherever. And I was always somewhere different every weekend that we had off. And that kind of led to it. And then I moved, unfortunately, I had to come back. I didn't want to leave Italy, but we left Italy and had to come back to the States. And so I ended up retiring where my dad did in Washington State. I got out and worked for the state of Washington for a few years as a diversity consultant. And then I saw an amazing deal come across, my Google searches, and it was like cheap flight, best we've ever seen from Seattle to New Zealand.
Oh,
And I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan. New Zealand's always been at the top of my bucket list. And I said, you know what? I'm going to go on this. And so I went on the trip, got to New Zealand, and I was driving the North and South Island. And I remember this moment on the South Island where I was like, just taking in the Remarkables and Queenstown in itself. And I said, I have to do this for a living. Like, I have to share this with people. I have to help people understand like all this stuff exists in the world. And so I got back home, called up some friends who were travel agents, or one friend in particular from high school who was a travel agent. She gave me some great advice. And then from there, I did the Google search. How do you become a travel agent? What is all the steps? And that's how I stumbled upon Host Agency Reviews. And I looked at the course long and hard. And I said, you know what? If you're going to take this seriously, what's what's a little bit of money to put into this? If you're going to invest in this, if you're going to be serious about this, invest this money into this course. And like I tell everybody, it's the best money I've invested into my business to this date. And I say I put a lot of money into a lot of different things here and there, but that was by far the best money because it walked me through the steps of opening a business, a travel related business, how to, develop your niche, how to develop all these. I mean, you look at everything. I mean, like I have a very unique niche. I feel like I found the right host agency. I feel like my financials and everything has been set up correctly from the start. So that was kind of my journey from growing up as a kid who traveled a lot and whose parents made sure that I got to see the world, to doing it myself. And then just, cultivating that love, just right when I got there, I was like, this is it. This is what I want to do.
that's so amazing. I love it. So I have a off-topic-ish question, but how did your Marine parents feel when you went to the Army?
So my dad, he gave me a hard time, but he had said to me early on, he said, the Marine Corps is for people who have something to prove to themselves. He's like, you know what you want to do. He's like, the Marines will kind of put you into you got to kind of find your way in the Marine Corps. He's like, but with the Army, he's like, you know exactly what you want to do. He's like, you want to jump out of airplanes. He's like, you want to do all this stuff. He's like, you know exactly what you want to do. He's like, so go for that. He's like, don't take a chance, go for that. And of course, there was always gonna be the inter-service rivalry. My own daughter just left, she's joined the Navy about 6 months ago. And so she's in a different branch. And so it's a weird dynamic, but it is what it is.
It's hysterical because a good friend of our downstairs neighbor went into the Marines like a year ago. And in case I ever forget, which I never do, every once in a while I'll hear like, hoo-yah downstairs. And I'm just like, Nico, you know there's no Marines around here, right? Are you just down there chatting with yourself? What's going on? So I've been learning a lot about the Marines lately, which is very exciting.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so one of the things that I really loved when we chatted, so Rocky took our course, and I'm a big sci-fi and fantasy reader as well. And so Rocky was like, Flights and Fables, this is what I'm going to specialize. I was like, OMG, I'm so excited. And so we chatted, but I think it was really interesting because the way you followed the course and kind of the suggestions about niche and the name, but you said the name that you had originally kind of thought or leaned towards, when you put it out there to your friends and family, they weren't on the same page as you. So tell us a little more.
So going through the whole naming convention thing and taking the advice of X amount of characters so that people don't misspell things. But in my mind, in my first thought, it was Imagination Expeditions. This is where I was going to go. And I thought that, but through the course, there's that part where they talk about, get the feedback from people, does it match this criteria? Is it easy to remember? Is it, and all the different criteria they have. So I said, you know what, I'm going to run some different names. I'm going to, use some generators and run some different names. So of course I went to the people I was going after. So I went to friends I knew who played Dungeons and Dragons, who were heavy gamers, very into the Lord of the Rings. I mean, I think one of the neighbors I gave it to had the speak friend and enter Lord of the Rings map going into their doorway. Harry Potter fans, and then also people who weren't into that, because I wanted it to also be relatable to people who weren't into that. So we did the jot form, and I sent it out to everybody, and I said, share it with your friends. And we got quite a bit of feedback because they sent it to all their communities.
So
And
nice.
surprisingly, Imagination Expeditions came in second. It was a good name, but it was handedly defeated by Flights and Fables, which I was shocked with. So I rinsed and repeated with the logo. So I went in and decided to let me develop a couple different logo ideas. And I knew I wanted like dragons or castles or something in the logo. So I did the same thing. And then I sent it out and I said, I sent the jot form back out. I was like, well, this was the name that won, thanks to you all. I was like, but now with that being said, take a look at this logo. And which logo do you think would best fit a business? And then I gave kind of the criteria of what we were going after. These are the types of trips we want to plan, but also being a travel agency first and foremost, which of these would go. And that's how, this logo came to be. And I put it on everything. And so, it's literally on like, my travel mug. It's all about brand. I think you're on mute, Steph.
Thanks. I had the dogs going by. I had to mute myself. So Rocky has an incredibly strong brand. So I would encourage those of you that are listening to the actual podcast to stop by the site and check it out. Like black and gold are kind of the main colors. There's a dragon, and the writing is very kind of old English, Lord of the Rings-esque. So it very much tells the story right when you look at it. Yeah. Okay, let's move into something that you did that's kind of unique. So not that many new travel advisors that are out there choose to go full-time right away, or I should say are able to. Like it's a little bit of a luxury. You have to have either a second income that you can live off or be able to have some kind of income coming in to help you through the first couple years. So you went from day one from full-time, and you gave up your 6-figure job at the state of Washington to kind of go on, start this agency that you didn't know if it was going to work or anything like that. But you committed fully to building the business. So talk with us about like your decision process, and why you decided to go full-time, who you think it's good for, like any risks, any pros and cons to it, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So I think it's, one, I will be the first to say I was blessed with having a retirement that I came in from it. And again, disability from the Army. It gave me enough income to sustain myself. I knew I knew kind of the risks going into this risk of, losing the income that I had and I was growing accustomed to for, the years I was working at the state. Mm-hmm. But I was, you get that entrepreneur bug, you go through the trainings, you go through stuff, and you kind of realize like one, I knew I was kind of destined to be an entrepreneur. Two, I knew I was passionate about travel. So putting the two together kind of worked perfectly for me. But having that ability to have that income, having, a spouse who has a good job, makes enough money, allowed me to really say, you know what, if I'm going to go into this, I'm going to go all in. And I was confident enough in myself. I knew I just know the niche is going to eventually be super successful. I know that I feel confident enough with my education and my background and my people skills to be able to sell travel. Like I know I can sell travel. I do have things to learn like everybody else. I still need to learn the art of closing the sale. I still need to learn how to close a deal. Maybe not be so filterless, I guess, sometimes, and remember to sell that trip. But I have a lot to learn, but I was supremely confident in my abilities to make a business be successful. And so I took the dive. I said, I want to be able to devote everything to this business because, it's the same thing it's not the same thing as other individuals who do it, but like people who put themselves into their restaurant, to their, office or whatever, that you have to kind of commit to it sometimes. And I think it allowed me to do the trainings and stuff. One thing I was, luckily for me, like I did start the business officially with the LLC in September of 2023. But what I did do was I was still working for a few months before we relocated to North Carolina from Washington State. We relocated to North Carolina. And so in that time while I still was working, I would get off work in the evenings and I was doing supplier trainings. I was learning everything about my host, learning everything about bookings. I was practicing bookings. I was running through software and learning and stuff. And so I took all that and then I did, I said, I'm going to make this jump. So I had a few months and I did the official launch in November of 2023. So I had a couple months in the background of building things, learning, trying to get, and then there was that time in November. I said, well, this is getting around the time when people start wanting to talk about travel and they get around their families and they get around and they're interested in travel. I was like, this is the time to launch. And so then I went in and launched. And it's been a blessing. But, again, I think for the people it's for is people who have a partner who has, income, or if you are retired and you have the ability to have an income coming in, to go full time. I think, or if you have the ability to, you have an economy and a part-time job that would allow you to do this full time. But I think everyone sees the same numbers that we all see from, the host agency review report that comes out every year about, salaries and things like this and how much we make. It's, even with a great niche, even with, I think, a sense of business, it still takes that time to build. And so I think you have to have that, like the advice that my friend who helped me get into the industry was, put a little credit card debt down if you're not afraid. If you're successful enough, put a little credit card debt down. I cashed out my retirement from the state of Washington. I took what little bit I had earned in 5 years. I cashed it all out and I put it all into the business, to all my branding, into all my logos, into my software. So I minus what the Army gives me for the rest of my life, I have no other money sitting there saved anymore. Like I took every last penny I had and I applied it to my business. And I think I see it paying off, but I just, that's who I think it would be best for, is individuals who have that ability to do that. But it's amazing the amount of part-time advisors who are now my mentors, who went from part-time to full-time. People I see on Facebook who just recently retired from their job or told their job that they're done because they now make enough money doing their business full-time. So I love watching that. It's such a great
Me too, story. Rocky. When someone is able to switch and able to quit their full-time job, I'm always like, my heart is so happy for them because it's such an accomplishment to be able to do that. And it's, as an entrepreneur, to be able to go full-time and to be like, yeah, my business has made it. We've all heard the kind of dismal stats on how many, not just agencies, but small business in general don't make it. And to say that you've built yours up to one that can provide a stable income for you and your family is huge.
Yeah.
Let's see. So one of the other things that you did from the very beginning, so for new advisors, deciding to go full-time and part-time is tricky. One of the other things is this big question about fees. And we cover both fees and kind of income in those reports Rocky mentioned earlier that we do annually. So we're going to link to those in the show notes for those that aren't familiar. They are a wealth of information on what you can expect income-wise, what people are charging for fees, how much they're charging, what type of travel they're charging for fees. So it really helps make you more confident in your decisions, I think, is one of the biggest values, at least for me as an entrepreneur. It would just make me be like, okay, other advisors are charging around $200. I'm not out of the ballpark here. And so Rocky, you decided day one, again, you are going to charge fees. So talk with us about why you decided that. And I know you've a couple times strayed from that, and then maybe tell us the stories, the lessons learned when you strayed from it.
Yeah. I mean, it was funny because I was listening, I think, one of your podcasts. I was in the gym working on, I had my podcast in and I was doing my walking like I do in the mornings. And I was, kind of going through the information about fees and what should you do? And, I was like, you got to start from the beginning. And so when you talk, when you listen to all the podcasts and you read all the things, you're like, there is a big disparity between who wants to charge fees and who doesn't. And again, in a perfect world, I would rather not, but I feel like there is a value and a worth to it. And so that's what I kept hearing from everybody. It's like, it allows for you to get paid what you're worth. And I was like, if I do it from the start, I don't have to surprise anybody later on down the line when I go ahead and say, hey, I'm going to start charging fees. And like you alluded to, like I definitely got burned early on with it. So when I did it, I said I'm gonna set up fees, and I tried to come up with something a little bit whimsical. You know, I came up with 3 different tiers because I felt like with this being a very unique niche that doesn't have there's not a lot of product out there. So you have to do a lot of this on your own to build it. And I say, so I need to be able to compensate myself for my time if I build all these fees.
Yeah.
And so I said, what do I think I'm worth? I'm like, well, for 1 to 7 days, it should only be $100 for a person. And we're going to call that an excursion. It's just, quick. And then I was like, for, 8 to 14 days, if I'm working on someone's 2-week trip, that's going to take a lot more time and energy. So I was like, let's just do a flat fee of $200. And then, I called that one a journey. And then I said, the third one, we'll call it an expedition. And that's for, 15 to 21 days. And then I put on my website, I said, anything beyond 21 days, let's sit down and have a talk. And again, I try to be very inclusive with the pricing. It's I put on there like 6 people, I think is what I consider a family, as family unit. But again, it's whoever comes to me, it's mostly to hold people true to booking with me. What I learned early on though, is I was like, some people would come to me and I would offer like a military discount. I wouldn't charge a fee. Or, I just was super nice and just decided I was like, oh, I'm going to throw this in there for free. And all of those I got burned on. I did all their planning. One individual wanted to go to Iceland. I built their whole trip for Iceland, and all of a sudden I didn't hear from them anymore. And then I saw Facebook photos months later from this person. I didn't know them, but I'd seen them post in a similar group that I had been a member of, which is how I found them, or how they found me. And, I see them in Iceland enjoying what I imagined was a trip that I had built for them. And I've had other people who've I built the trip for, they paid my planning fee, and they didn't end up booking with me, but I built their itinerary, and I'm like, well, at least my work didn't go for nothing. At least and they found better deals than what I could offer. And I completely understand that. I'm not here to try and rip anybody off. So if they found it cheaper than what I could provide for them, but they still paid my planning fee, my work was compensated. The third one I always find funny was I got an inquiry form. I had back-to-back calls one night for a discovery call, and one younger lady and her friends, 21st birthday party, wanted to go to California. Very small budget. I told them my planning fee. They were like, okay, cool, we'll pay it for you, and we'll get started. Immediately after I had the call, I had an individual, I think their budget was somewhere 14 to 21,000, 10 to 14 day trip to a couple countries in Europe. Pretty easy. I mean, it would probably have some logistics, but it didn't seem like anything very hard. It was the major ones, I think it was Rome, Paris, and London, very easily connected. I told him at the end of the call that I had a planning fee, and he said, oh, well, so-and-so down the street doesn't have it. I'm going to go with them. And so, who doesn't charge a planning fee. So I thought it was interesting that someone who had a very limited, $5,000 budget, $3,000 budget, I think, was willing to pay $100 they saw the worth in me. And then you turn around and someone else who had a $14,000 to $21,000 budget didn't see enough to pay a $200 planning fee. So I said, and it's kind of just solidified and just made me feel good about my decision to kind of stick with my planning fees.
Yeah, I feel like those anecdotes bring up 2 really important points for me. Is like, one, you just never know who you're dealing with. Don't judge a book by its cover. And then 2, that with those planning fees, they're really because I liked when we chatted prior to this, and we were talking about the people that ended up booking. They found it for X amount cheaper, and people are on budgets, and that's a reality. And so for me, I always think, if I was selling travel and I had a client and they weren't able, they could save $1,000 going somewhere else, I'm not going to hold anything against them if they go there, especially when you charge a planning fee. And I think that's part of it, is because of the structure of how travel agencies work, where you're not compensated until somebody books. And then after they travel, this gives you the insurance that, like when I started HAR, one of the things I thought of is like, how much do I need to make so that not a lot is going to ruffle my feathers? Because my theory is, if your feathers are getting ruffled a lot and you're getting irritated with your clients, like, one, maybe this isn't the right job for you, but two, you need to kind of reevaluate and figure out, what do I need to do to make this so that I don't feel like I've wasted my time and I'm not upset with people? Because I always feel like it's kind of a sign when you're getting upset with your clients all the time that something isn't set up where you're not feeling like people are appreciating you.
Yeah. My biggest sale to date, they actually just got back, but it was funny. They met me, and I know we'll talk about vendor events at a point, but like, they met me at an event early last year. I think it was April last year, 2024. They met me, went into a booking, paid my planning fee. We were going to book them for that July, August, but things came up. And I kept, trying to like slowly nudge him and say, hey, you paid this planning fee. Like, I know you want to travel at some point. And finally I sent him an email in January, I revisited and said, hey, it's been a while since we talked. I was like, there's really great deals going to Scotland and the UK for like Harry Potter. $30,000 later, on a trip, because you knew that he had paid for it, so you knew that this client wanted to go. But it's kind of one of those things, like it lets you know, like, when you're engaging someone, like if they're how much time you're going to devote, because as we all know, time is money as you start getting busier and busier, and you have to know when you're going to devote energy and effort to these individuals who aren't responding back to you. And you're like, well, I've got all these other people on my list, but if they paid the planning fee, you're like, well, they paid, so they're invested, so I know that they're in this with me. Like, they don't take $200 lightly. Or if they do, we need to talk more. But like, yeah, so it helps me prioritize. And like, all clients are important to me, but if you paid my planning fee, I know that you are committed to this as much as I am. And here, I'm going to keep checking in with you till we get that perfect itinerary built.
Oh, it's so true. This is just an aside, but I always feel like, so when I'm giving away things at the house or something, like for me, sometimes I'm just like, oh, I don't want to post it up somewhere for like $15 or $10. Like, it's not worth my time. I just want it gone. But I found whenever I offer something for free that, it takes 1,000 times longer because so many people drop out. They'll be like, yeah, we'll come, this evening. And then they never get back to you. Or there's definitely something about charging people that makes them so they've got a lot more skin in the game and take things more seriously. Well, let's start. We're going to move into the next section that I want to talk about, which is client acquisition, something you do incredibly well. So a lot of agents really struggle, especially as they're starting out with this finding new clients. But you have really, and one of the things I love about Travel Agent Chatter is that we get to talk to advisors from all walks of life, and everybody does it differently. I always get, the reason at HAR we only have the 7-day setup course, like on how to start up your agency, is because that's very factual and like, this is how you do it, and you should follow this kind of step-by-step process. But after that, I feel like there is so much creativity for how you want to build and run your business. And that's what's really exciting about it. And so you have chosen, some people find newsletters or social media works really well for them, or public speaking gigs, but you've really focused in on vendor events, which I don't think we've interviewed someone that has before. And so by vendor events, we kind of mean like, the local gardening show or Comic-Con or things like that, where you see like there's a vendor booth and then someone would have their travel agency at like a honeymoon and destination wedding event or something. So you don't just show up at these random events. So how do you decide which events to go to and if they're kind of worth your time and money? So maybe you can talk about some of the experiences you've had.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, having that beautiful niche of knowing like it comes down to like, again, when you're getting into the business and you have to identify like, who is your client? Like, who are you going after? I think that's like the first and foremost thing is like, you have to develop what we always call the client avatars and things like this. So I have my avatars built. I know who I'm looking for. I know their age demographics. I know where I should
Tell us about them. Who's your avatar?
Well, I mean, the main one is I call them the fantasy traveler. And they're usually between 30 and 50 years old. They're heavily into Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, Game of Thrones. They play Dungeons and Dragons, or they have some type of Magic the Gathering. I mean, there's a number of different things. We know to find them at comic book stores, at game stores, in libraries. And then we start looking at what kind of events. And so that kind of like narrows down, where do these people go? And so, you start getting into Facebook pages of like vendor events, and you find, so obviously the first one that comes to mind for anybody who's into this thing is, your first thing you're thinking is Comic Cons. Like this is, they become more than just about comic books. They become, thanks to the San Diego Comic Con, they become premier events for releasing new movies and new, books and everything. And so those are the people you're going after, and especially in this niche. We're going after those type of people who like those types of things. So that's the first thing you start looking at is like, okay, where are the local Comic Cons? What are they going to do? Then you find kind of like you start attending different ones and then those people will be like, oh, you should really check out this one. So like a prime example is, we talk about good and bad. I did the Fayetteville Comic Con here in Fayetteville, North Carolina. Not very good return on investment. We spent a lot of money for it. It wasn't very good. We turned around and did a local one for a library. It was called the Lee County Library LCL PopCon. It was just a PopCon. I paid $35 for that. I had double the email subscribers. I booked 3 trips off of that, whereas I booked no one off of the other one. And so for $35 versus, I think it was $250 for the Fayetteville Comic Con versus $35 for this PopCon, and I've already booked 3 trips, and I've got a 4th one coming up. It's just finding that, and you've got to kind of tweak them, and again, learning where everyone's at. So in that event, I learned about Geek and Grub, and that's a local one in Raleigh, North Carolina, where they do a lot of themed events each month, where it's fantasy travel or fantasy one month, and it was anime another month, and Pride one month, and wizarding the next month, and book nerds the next month. And so they have tons of these. Halloween is a big one they do. So they have them themed, and you go to that, and you meet people there, and they're like, oh, you should go to this other one called Festival of Legends in Holly Springs, which is where a lot of people with, a lot of good income reside. And so then you expand to that one. And so before you know it, you've got all these, you're going to all these events. Fayetteville does this, they do these 4th Fridays, but twice a year they do one called the Nerd Market. And so again, you're thinking, this is my demographic. These are the people I'm going after. I'm of course going to pay $60 to go to a nerd market where other vendors who are selling similar products, comics and cards and fantasy themed and related items, we all go and we all sell the stuff, but you're being kind of one of the first in that. And then one of the big ones was, I'm Italian American and I lived in Italy for a long time. So I obviously have no problem selling Italy. So I do sell a lot of Italy. And so I reached out to one called Festa Italiana, which was probably about I think it's a $250 commitment for that one. But 15,000 people showed up for that one, including a person who saw me at that one and said, hey, we would love someone who sells Europe to come and go to our Christmas markets to sell Christmas markets. And so that's what I started realizing is like, if you have a niche, if you have a particular region you sell to, that's where you should be going. I've always said like the same thing with like interviews when I was interviewing for jobs when I got out of the Army. My resume, if I can get my resume through to you to where I can speak in person, I can sell myself on you. It's the same thing I think with travels. I'm confident enough in the way that I am passionate about what I sell that I can sell you on travel. I just need to get you in front of me. Social media, I'm not the best at knowing what's the right wording to put in a social media post or how to gain someone's attention. Flyers, all the things I put out, they hit or miss. But when I'm at an event and I have my pop-up banner, and my wife and I watch it every time we're at with these events, my pop-up banner has a big Hobbit hole on the front of it. And people walk by my tent with pay me no mind whatsoever. but they will see that hobbit hole and they will stop and we will count down, like, here they come, 3, 2, and they walk back and say, hey, tell us more about this. Tell us what you do. And that's all I need. I just need the invitation to open up to then say, hey, this is what we do. And people usually are like, I've never heard of this. I didn't know that this is a thing. And I was like, well, it's something I'm developing. It is a thing now. I and others have created this and we've done similar things and I go through with it. But I sell myself. I feel like I'm passionate about this type of travel, that I can sell people on it when I'm in person. And that's where I'm strong. I think for people who sell like, all inclusive, like if there's a Caribbean fest or if there's a, any type of these small vendor events, I think if you're not paying a lot of money, it's worth it.
Yeah.
I use my ROIs on my new email newsletter. And I know this is something we didn't talk about in the last one, but my newsletter, I took a lot of courses and they said, I didn't take my newsletter serious in the beginning. And I had just left it like 7 people. Now I'm up to like 240 people and I'm still trying to grow it at each of these events. That's how I determined how successful my event is how many email subscribers I got based upon how much I paid for the vendor event. Well, I did a Christmas market. I'm doing a Christmas market river cruise next year. And within 30 minutes of my email going out to the subscriber list, I already had 3, and I think I have a 4th one setting up a meeting with me to talk about going on this river cruise, and all off of my email subscriber list. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, we all know river cruises are pretty good with your commission. So that could be a huge selling point. And so the ROI stacks of you pay X amount of dollars, you get yourself in front of, 14,000 people, 8,000 people, 6,000 people. You get so many people to subscribe to your newsletter, which means you're going to keep coming into their inbox every so often, once a month, twice a month. And then you book the trip off that. So it's just understanding like it's a process. You got to give it time. No one walks into my booth 99% of the time saying, hey, I'm ready to book a trip today. But if I can stay in front of them, if I can get in their mind, then maybe, I'll get them 6 months down the road. Like I've said in a couple of these examples, I've gotten them a few months down the road, which is what matters in the end.
Mm-hmm. So a couple things stick out to me when you're telling and talking about this. One is you have a way of measuring the return on the investment or the ROI instead of just being like, I'm going to go to this show. We'll see. No one calls within 6 months. It just isn't worth it for me. The newsletter list is something that's very tangible. It allows you to stay connected with people. We all know that it's a long sales cycle in most cases for travel. And so getting these names now that they're interested enough to sign up with it, within 2 years, if you're not getting anything from that list, maybe it wasn't very good, but you should always wait a little bit. The other thing is talking about your pull-up banner. That's super exciting because I know you talked when we were earlier speaking that you really invested in the booth because you're going to be doing all these vendors events and having booths. And so can you describe, you've got this pull-up banner with this hobbit hole on it. What else do you have that makes your booth kind of pop amongst all the others?
Well, I spent the money. So when I said I pulled my money out of my retirement and I put it into the business, one of the things I said I wanted was this booth setup. So I did the tablecloth with the logo on the front, so it drapes over. And of course, my crown gem is my tent. I have a standard 10 by 10 tent, but I went to a local company. And again, this is a thing that I'm a strong believer in is keeping everything local. You can go to these major companies, these major corporations. They're not buying travel off of you. But if you go to, Susan's Printing down the street, she might use you for something later on. When she's ready to travel, you gave her business, she might give you business. The large companies who I won't name are not going to probably give you business, but keeping things local in the community does. And so I went to a local print shop in the community. They did my banner, they did my tablecloth, but they did my tent, which is an all black tent with my website, on the little flaps that come down. But on the top is this giant dragon with Flights and Fables on it, on all 4 sides. And there's been a number of times I've been at places and people will come up and say, I saw you from the parking lot. I saw you and I had to come see if this is what I thought it was, if this was a fantasy travel agency or whatever they wanted to call it. And they would see it from the parking lot. So a lot of people go and buy what they can buy. And again, big, do what you got to do to get out to the vendor events. But I knew from the start I wanted to invest in this. And I wanted to invest because I knew I was going to be in a lot of vendor events. I knew that's where my strong point was at. So I invested heavily. I'd say, about $1,000 is what I put into this entire setup, because the tent was the most expensive. It was to get it custom made. It was about $800 to $900. And then the pop-up banner and the tablecloth were not that bad. They were relatively cheap. But I have my flyers out. I have my little flyers that I have, which I call my trip inspiration flyers.
Oh, hold on. I'm going to pull them up. Well, for those that are watching the YouTube video, you'll be able to see it. For those that are listening, you're going to have to go to our website and check out the landing page. So go ahead. I'm going to pull it up.
Yeah, and so they're just little fun flyers of like giving people inspiration of where they can go, because they're not set trips. It's like, do you want to go to a Lord of the Rings, inspired trip in New Zealand? Like, here's what it could look like. Here's some of the things we could book for you. A Harry Potter themed trip in the United Kingdom. I always do Vikings and vampires, and everybody unfortunately gets it confused, like it's Vikings and vampires. I'm like, no, it's just run out of space on these tables. So I just put Vikings and vampires, the double V's together, but I explained them. You can go to the vampires stuff in Romania. You can do Vikings in Scandinavia. And so I love just being able to like give people this inspiration of like places they can go. But yeah, so those sit on my table. I always try to have like little knickknacks that I pick up from I have a Harry Potter wand for my sign up list that people use. And as I go to these other events, I meet other vendors and I sell, I'll grab little products from them and just kind of put them on the table. I bought, someone was selling a cute little knickknack of vampire teeth in a little bottle with like some cryptic writing on it. And I put that in front of my Vikings and vampires one, just as a fun prop, just to get people excited, just to get them interested. And you're selling another vendor's product, or you're getting a vendor's product, they're giving you your stuff back. It's just that whole sense of community and networking that I do.
Yeah, that's fantastic. We'll put kind of those inspirational flyers, because they're visually delicious looking. We'll put them up so everybody can take a look at them on the landing page. And then, you also talked about the newsletter, how you've taken a lot of trainings. We did a couple during host week. We had a couple sessions on newsletters the last few years that I'll link to for people that want to get their kind of wheels spinning a little bit more on how to better utilize their newsletters. Okay, let me see. I felt like there was something else with your booth, but now I can't remember it. All right, so let's kind of move in. We're going to talk about, you also said you did some sports events too. How did those work out?
I did. And so those were a pretty penny. So we have a local minor league affiliate team of the Houston Astros called the Fayetteville Woodpeckers, gorgeous stadium. And we have a hockey team called the Fayetteville Marksmen. Very, very well turned out events, but every year they do a Back to Hogwarts or a Wizarding Night that they call it, where they use themed jerseys and things, themed products that they sell with the local team stuff, with a very Harry Potter-ish, theming to everything. But so I thought, Back to Hogwarts night, I'm going to go to this Fayetteville Woodpeckers and I'm going to do this event. And it was well turned out. It is the largest night. There was people waiting an hour and a half in line to get into this event. The maximum capacity is, I think, about 6,000 people at these stadiums. So they're very well turned out events. But it was a good lesson learned in that people come to sporting events to check out sports or to get the merchandise or the memorabilia. In my mind, the niche matching with that, being able to be a vendor at these events was a good idea. But I learned through trial and error that it wasn't. And it was an expensive lesson. I will say, it was an expensive lesson. And I think the one thing I've taken from it going forward is that we don't sign up for events randomly anymore. If we see something that we like, we're in the long game. We're going to attend the event, and then we're going to go and see what the event looks like, see who's walking around, what kind of crowd are they getting, and then from there say, okay, next year, or as soon as the application's open, we're gonna sign up for this, because people are kind of timid to put a travel agent in there. A lot of times, I've noticed in a lot of events, but
Interesting.
there's scams and other things that people are they're not looking for.
MLMs.
MLMs is basically what they tell me. A lot of times you'll see a lot of these events like, we're not looking for MLMs at these events. And so they'll tell you, like, but you have to go in and explain yourself. And so I always go and talk to everybody and say, yeah, this is what I do, this is what I sell, and that's what I'm going to, this is why I feel like I'm a good fit for this. And usually they'll respond back like, absolutely, we want you there, especially for the fantasy themed ones.
That makes, for those that don't know what an MLM is, that's multi-level marketing pyramid schemes. We'll link to an article on it so you can learn a little bit more. But talking about kind of these, you get some wins, you get some loses as you're starting out. And that's just kind of the journey of entrepreneurship. It's always kind of, you win some, you lose some. So let's talk about, there's a couple things about entrepreneurship I wanted to talk to. Like you mentioned learning from your mistakes, and that there have been some expensive mistakes. Like, for instance, when you were working with the DMC or destination management company, where it was like a $12,000 trip and you had misunderstood how it works, so you only made something like $200. Can you tell us more on that?
Yeah, so it was, I got to, so the story behind it is, I went to New Zealand for a meal through the New Zealand Tourism Board, and I was able to go. And while I was on some tourism boards and some, travel agent tourism boards, people kept saying, for New Zealand, who do you use to sell? And so I found Anscrow. And so I set up a meeting with them and I said, hey, I'm going to go over there and I want to meet you all in person when I go on this trip. And so we set up a meeting. It was great. I still love them as a DMC. They're still my favorite DMC, but it was my first time working with them. I'm still learning net commission, what is a net commission and what is commissionable rates. And I was learning all this. And so I didn't ever think to put like what commission I wanted to get back on this. So I said, well, here's my client's budget and here's what we've got. And it came back. And when it was all said and done, it was like $12,000. I was like, okay, well, how much of that am I going to get? And they're like, well, you didn't put, how much commission you wanted to get. You just said you wanted to spend this. And I had already promised this to my clients. Like, this is all the things you're going to get. So in the long run, yeah, this $12,000 honeymoon, Lord of the Rings themed honeymoon, $12,000, I made about $258 off that trip. And it was a great lesson learned, though. I mean, it was, I think the one thing we all talk about is like, I don't look at it as a loss. I look at it as like, one, they were great clients, and I still talk to them to this day, and they gave me an amazing review. So their trip was awesome. My DMC was awesome, and I learned from my mistake on how to work with DMCs moving forward. It was my first true time working with a DMC at this point, so I really learned a very good lesson. But I got great clients out of it. They had an amazing honeymoon, and I got a great review off it. Those things I think trump, the commission sometimes, because when people go to my website or they go onto my page and they can see this glowing review from this client, that's worth it in the long run. But we don't do that anymore. We definitely make sure we get our markup on those types of things now that we know. But great lesson learned. I mean, it was, I think it's just one of those things that I think every travel agent goes through, is you have those lessons learned.
Yes, exactly. And one of the keys to being a successful entrepreneur, I feel like, is having resilience, because we all have made really stupid mistakes. If anyone tells you they haven't, they're lying when they're talking about their business. So, and one of the other things is it can be a little bit lonely when you're working from home, being your own boss. And I know you've kind of built out this community with networking with other entrepreneurs, travel advisors, and outside the travel community. And that those communities are not just helping with new ideas and seeing things differently and making it less isolating, being a home-based entrepreneur, but you've also had like some partnerships that are come out of it and things like that. So maybe do you want to talk about, let's have you chat on the Chamber of Commerce, how you've used that for networking and learning from other entrepreneurs, and what good things have come from that.
I mean, the Chamber of Commerce was, so, I was told from my dad, who also opened his own business when he got out of the military, was the Chamber of Commerce is super important to be a part of. I think the first and foremost thing is it offers validity, that you're not just a run-of-the-mill person who's doing this, that you're investing in the community and the community invests in you. And so it allows you opportunity to go to a number of different meetings, to meet people, to showcase your business, to show and to kind of see like, well, okay, I didn't know you sell this. I mean, one example of a person I met at one of them is they do TSA pre-checks here locally. Like one of their side things that they do in their office is also TSA pre-checks. Okay, cool. Like I can partner with you. I can send my clients when they don't know where to go to get TSA pre-check or to do a background investigation or to get their passports, I can send them to these people to help with these different things. So you learn so much from other businesses, and it's just listening to them and seeing how can I work with you. And from that, I met a smaller group of entrepreneurs, like this other smaller group of entrepreneurs who have kind of become like our backbone. We're all in the Chamber of Commerce together, but we're like more of the self-employed, self-owned businesses, realtors and web design and things like this. And we all work together, kind of just getting to meet and share experiences and share our stories. And it's become a really powerful thing.
Did you all start at the same time, roughly, your businesses?
I think we're all like not far off of each other. I think some people have been real estate agents for a little bit, but I think the group had been around for a few months before I had gotten into there, but it's really strengthened and grown over time, including other people. And now we bring in like guest speakers and things like that instead of just all of us chatting about our stories and what's going on in our lives. It's been very helpful to have these as well. So yeah, and I think the biggest things are they're a support network. So like I think when we were talking earlier, Fayetteville's a pretty decent sized city. This community around here is, depending on if you incorporate the base, you're talking somewhere between 200 and 400,000 people. And there's a very large Facebook group that, I think everybody goes to. It's, I think, got 60,000 members. And you'll have this moment where somebody will say, hey, randomly once every couple months, hey, I'm looking for a travel advisor. And you think, because you don't see a lot of travel advisors, you think you're this one shining star in this city. And you realize very quickly, 40, 50 travel agents come out of the woodwork. And you're like, holy cow, I did not know there was this many of them. But where that network became so important was while everybody else is like, hey, I'm a travel advisor. Hey, I'm a travel advisor. Hey, I'm a travel advisor. I get in this group, hey, I'm Rocky with Flights and Fables. And then I get my fellow entrepreneurs. Hey, Rocky with Flights and Fables. Hey, Rocky with Flights and Fables. Trust Flights and Fables. And so now instead of just being 40 different people mentioned one time, your business is mentioned 7, 8, 9 times over everybody else, where they're only being mentioned one. So we build this thing. And so all of a sudden people start saying, okay, this person's mentioned 9 times. These ones are all mentioned, and I'm sure they're great people, but this person's mentioned 9 times by these other entrepreneurs or these other people or however they come across. And so that's such a strong network right there where we do that for each other. And of course, I would do the same thing for all of them. And so that has developed into a lot of the different partnerships that I know we're going to talk about. And I don't want to segue until you're ready to it, but I've built some of my strongest partnerships from those events.
Yeah. Well, let's jump into the partnership section because you've done a lot of creative partnerships that I think a lot of other advisors could be really inspired from. So I know you've got a map maker on there. You've got someone that does IV hydration on your website. I'm going to link to the page on your site that has kind of the regional partnerships that you have going on. But let's have you talk about how you decide who you're going to partner with, how you create that relationship.
Yeah, and so it has to make sense. Like first and foremost, it has to make sense. So the first one was Chris Ward Photography. She was in our network group, and she's a photographer, and we hadn't gotten a chance to meet yet. Everybody's like, well, she's heading to New Zealand, and when we finally had to meet, she's like, hey, I really want to talk to you. I'm heading to New Zealand to do this photography shoot where I'm going to learn about New Zealand and doing shoots in New Zealand. And I said, oh, she's like, we can chat when I get back. Well, I was like, well, I too am going to New Zealand for my second trip to New Zealand. So I was like, we'll chat when I get back. So we set up a meeting. We talked. She wanted to expand her photography business into destination photography. Well, travel advisor, destination photography. I mean, kind of a match made in heaven. So we're working on a lot of different things where, you know, whether she gets the client and they want to go somewhere and they say, hey, you know, Rocky will book us everything, you know, he'll put it all together, or me, where I'm like working on some of these group trips in the future, as I want to bring her along and have it as a, hey, while we're on this trip, you can have this destination photographer, you know, who's going to come with us and do these cool epic shoots and things like this. We're looking at doing some in like Iceland with Viking themed, you know, getting people to get their hair done and put on fur coats and do these inspired themed shoots. So it's just a natural match made, you know, with somebody who wants to do destination photography, and you're a travel agent, you're booking the travel for them, you're helping with the logistics so that she can focus on doing the pictures and the shoots, and you're just worried about making sure they get there, you know, and get everything taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
Then the Prime IV and hydration one was, we were talking and I got to meet Savannah, and she was opening up her business, you know, a little bit after mine. And we were talking and she's like, well, I do, you know, jet set or jet lag IV drips. And I was like, well, I mean, I have a lot of clients who do a lot of long haul trips to New Zealand, to Japan, to wherever. I was like, they're going to need, you know, to get this, you know, it's a great way. So she offered slight discounts, you know, offered a discount. She's like, if someone comes from your company, you know, from one of your trips, and I'll give them a discount when they come in. And I send her products out, the jet lag ones, to my clients when I send them on a trip with their trip pack. I was like, hey, when you get back, you're, you know, more than welcome to get a 30% off discount if you want to get like a jet lag IV. And then, you know, of course, the fun part is she calls it the Flights and Fables chair, you know, because we partnered with this. And so her jet lag IV one that has a little plane on it, she calls it the Flights and Fables chair. And we do marketing for each other. When she has a jet, you know, she's doing a jet lag or jet set IV post, I will share it with my clients, and she'll do the same thing when she's talking about travel with things like mine. She'll share my post, and the same thing with Chris with the destination photography. We do the same thing. The map maker was just a really unique opportunity where he was at one of the events that we were vendoring at. I went there and I started talking to him, and I said, you know, travel maps. He does these amazing fantasy maps. I say, you know, let's talk about what a partnership could look like. And I was like, I can offer your products as a gift to clients or something for them to take as a token of remembrance from their trip, that if it's a Lord of the Rings inspired vacation in New Zealand, they can do a really cool map that's very, you know, he does them in Lord of the Rings-esque map making.
Yeah.
And so, you know, some clients who go on like a larger budget trip, I would splurge on something like that for the client, you know, as a way to say thank you and to say, hey, here is a memento for your trip, or something like that. But at the same time, advertising for him, you know, and so we partner, you know, so as people are looking at his maps and saying, I'd really love to go to New Zealand and see the Lord of the Rings sites. And he's like, well, it's funny you should ask. I know a person who does that. And so you're finding those unique things. And there's smaller partnerships I've done with a lot of other people who have unique candles that have like Lord of the Rings, you know, Shire inspired candles, or people who do, you know, just very unique things. They will offer it up, and I will give it to clients as a gift with their business card in there, and having, you know, promotion for them. So we're all promoting each other locally. So if someone asks about a trip, they'll send them my way. If someone gets one of my packages and says, I really loved that bath bomb, and I know it sounds weird, but we have a very amazing entrepreneur, two young girls, started out at 17 and I think 14 or 15.
Whoa.
And they've been doing this for years, and they won the award for the Fayetteville Greater Chamber of Commerce, or Greater Fayetteville Chamber of Commerce, like up and coming entrepreneur of the year award last year. And they're known throughout the community. So they do these bath bombs. And so they give me these dragon egg bath bombs, or different things that they'll give me, and they don't ask anything in return. And I just put their business card in there so that if people are interested in them, they can come back. So I'm just always trying to navigate unique opportunities, and some work and some don't, but you know, it's a lot of fun along the way, because you're promoting fellow businesses and they're promoting yours. And it's just this great sense of community amongst entrepreneurs. I think it's easier to do it when you're not doing it with other travel agencies as much as it's when you're doing it with people who you find a way to offer that unique relationship.
Yeah, like when you have the complementary or the same audience, it's a perfect fit, because, you know, people that love fantasy have a lot of the same things that they like. And so it's very helpful to introduce people to to cute new products or things along those lines. Now, this is a less traditional partnership, but I know that there's another fantasy travel advisor that is in your area, which is because I've never heard of a fantasy travel advisor before, which is why I was so excited. So tell me more about that relationship, because I think it's easy for a lot of people to feel like, oh, there's another destination wedding and honeymoon advisor around here that's poaching my clients, potential clients. But your relationship seems totally different than that.
Yeah, I mean, it started out when I was posting in my host agency's, thing about going to an event in Atlanta, and someone was like, well, I'm driving down from North Carolina, so, I don't know if I'm going to go. And I was like, well, of course I'm going to stalk this person and see, oh, they're in North Carolina, where they at? And then you find out like, wait, they sell what? I thought I was very unique in this. I thought I was like one of the only ones who did this. And so you find out like, one, we're in the same host agency. Two, we sell the same stuff. And three, we're an hour away from each other. Like, what are the chances? When I was doing all my research for this, I didn't find a lot of these, fantasy, I guess, travel advisors. And she uses a different name. She uses Nerd Ventures for hers, which I think is awesome.
Mm-hmm. I love it.
But what we realized was like, there's enough travel to go around that we're only going to make ourselves like tired if we're fighting each other. In fact, we said cooperation over competition. And in doing so, we cover down for each other on trips, because she knows that when she sends a client to New Zealand for Lord of the Rings, she has a person who's very capable of understanding all things Lord of the Rings, all things New Zealand, or Harry Potter, and vice versa with her. If I'm going and I need someone to cover down for me, I know she's very capable of covering down on that trip for me and making sure my clients are getting the absolute best experience. And so we learn new suppliers. So I'll find out that, hey, there's this new company I heard about, they're offering X, Y, and Z. And she'll say, I didn't hear about them. And we'll go and explore them together, because it's so much more fun when you're friends and you're not, you're cooperative and not competing with each other. And we've just had a great relationship since then, and we just work together on everything. So it's been I think it's a thing that I want to see more people do, is like, I mean, I understand you have to be competitive like that. You're not gonna let everybody walk all over you. You're in charge of your livelihood and your business and your family and everything like that. But if you're not in an oversaturated market and you're selling something, decently unique, and there's two of you in the same area, just work together and just realize like, hey,
yeah, well, it seems like you guys have very similar personalities too. And I it doesn't work with everybody, because let's be honest, some people are just kind of jerks and you don't really want to be working with them. But it is just so nice to find somebody, because you're going through the exact same challenges. And I think one thing I learned early on, because there was someone that copied our site and it really upset me when it first happened. And I was like, this is just so rude. Who would do that? Like, the nerve. And I was really upset. But then someone gave me like a piece of advice, and I started realizing it. And it's that like, no one can be you. And they can copy, because they were copying the text from my site that I had written on each host agency. It was just really frustrating. And I was like, yeah, you can copy the text about a specific host agency, but I have a very, I'm kind of quirky and a little bit weird and like to have like a ton of fun and integrate that into my work. And that's not something like, no one can recreate my weird random things that pop into my head where I'm like, I'm going to write a love poem haiku for the end of my Travel Agent Chatter podcast today. That's brilliant. Like, no one else thinks like that. And so those are like things to really embrace about yourself and be confident about. Because I think a lot of the time when people are really competitive, it can also be rooted in not being super confident and the uniqueness that you bring with your personality and the way that you do things. So that's something like I think entrepreneurs can definitely work on, that are feeling really self-conscious or upset about others in the field or the industry.
Yeah. And I think one thing her and I have talked about is like, we're two different people, like you mentioned. Some people are going to feel more comfortable. I mean, this is we've seen the numbers. This is a very woman and female dominated industry,
Yeah.
from a very male dominated industry, and I had to come to one quite the opposite. But some people are going to feel more comfortable going to someone,
Yeah.
different than me. And some people might feel more comfortable with the way I do things. And so we offer that perspective to people, I think, because we do vendor at a couple of events at the same time. And it's again, people have their choice. They can go to either person and say, hey, this is a person that more naturally fits my style. This is who I feel more comfortable with. And I think giving them options is sometimes a great thing, because if you're working with somebody you don't really want to, if they're working with somebody they don't want to work with, you don't really want to work with them because you're not a good match, then it's never going to be a fun. You're just doing it for the money at that point. And are you really helping them travel, or are you just collecting a paycheck? And I don't think that's what we all really get into this business for.
No, exactly. And you talked earlier too about, like you specifically wanted to do this Lord of the Rings, the fantasy, and you gave this cool anecdote of a friend that you were taught, or like one of your first clients that like wanted to go to Hawaii, which you're not a beach person. And you were like, okay, you walked them through it, you sold it, you booked it. And then the next year they wanted to go to New Zealand. So tell us what what they told you about booking New Zealand with Rocky versus booking Hawaii with Rocky, because I think this is awesome.
Yeah, it goes to being passionate about what you sell. And I had been to Hawaii. Again, like you perfectly alluded to, I'm not a fan of I've been to 63 countries in this world, and most of them are Europe, Oceania, Japan. It's not. I mean, I think I've touched a little bit of the Caribbean. I've been to Hawaii, just to say I've been to all 50 states. Not my happy place. It's not a bad place. I understand why people enjoy it. It's just not my cup of tea.
Mm-hmm.
And so someone asked me, hey, would you be willing to book, would you be willing to book this for us with Hawaii? I was like, sure. I was like, I've been to Hawaii. And so I went through it, and I was kind of, felt going through the motions. I just was like, yeah, this is what I did. This was really good. And this will match up what you want to do, snorkeling with turtles and this and this. And I was putting it together. And so they came back later and they said, well, hey, I really think about doing like Australia and New Zealand. And so, of course, this triggers in me. I'm like, oh my God, New Zealand. And I tell everybody it's my favorite country in the world. 63, and it's number one by far. And so I just get super excited about it. I'm like, oh my gosh, you go to Auckland and you do this, and you're gonna get down to Wellington and do this. And when you get down to Queenstown, oh my gosh, like one of the most beautiful cities in the world. And he's like, hold up. He's like, well, when you were selling us Hawaii, he's like, you were very just matter of fact. He's like, you definitely make me want to go to New Zealand now. He's like, because the passion you have for New Zealand versus, Hawaii. He's like, you did a great job with Hawaii. He's like, we loved it. We had a blast. He's like, but the passion in which you speak about New Zealand, he's like, I've got to get there. I've got to go. And so it really was like a light bulb for me, is like, if you sell something you're not passionate about, people are going to see right through it. It's the authenticity of it, and that's what you have to do in this industry, is you have to be authentic. And I'm passionate about Europe. I'm passionate about New Zealand. I'm passionate about all my fantasy travel. I mean, that's how this all came to be, was when I went through the host agency review course and we were looking at how do I sell, what is my niche going to be? I look back on all my travels and I was like, I knocked Stonehenge off. And I was like, I went to Harry Potter 3 times in London. And I did Viking stuff. And I went to see Pele's Castle and Bran's Castle with all this Viking inspired stuff or vampire inspired stuff in Romania. And then Lord of the Rings in New Zealand, my bucket list trip. And I was like, that's who I am. I was like, I'm this guy who travels all these mystical and these fantasy locations and Game of Thrones. And so I think when you're passionate about it and you're something you believe strongly in, you're gonna sell. If you don't like I had to eventually come to a point where I was early on, and I'm like everybody else, you're trying to sell everything. You're trying to just get something. And I was selling cruises and I was selling this. And I had a great piece of advice from our chief operating officer and the head of marketing for my host agency. And we sat down in one of his sessions, and it was like, if you're not passionate about it, people are going to see right through you.
Yeah.
And so I doubled down on it. And I said, you know what? I'm not going to sell things I'm not passionate about. So I go to these vendor events. People are like, well, do you do Hawaii or do you do this? And I was like, I could, but I don't. I said, there's 1,000 people in this community who can sell you Hawaii, who can sell you the Caribbean. I said, but I guarantee no one's going to build you a Lord of the Rings trip like I can. I guarantee no one's going to give you an authentic, Romania Viking or vampire experience. I was like, I'm pretty confident in my abilities to get you an amazing trip based upon what you want. And I think that's where you sell people, is when they know your stuff. Because
Yep.
a lot of travel advisors go to a lot of places in the world. But I think to go to the unique places I've been, I think gives me just a little bit leg up of like, when I see other travel advisors, and again, not knocking other travel, I'm just saying, when people say I sell everything, I think what I've learned to do with myself is like, I don't sell everything. Like, I'm not going to sell you on a place I've never been. I'm not going to sell you on a place I don't know. When you get book travel with me, you getting someone who's got firsthand experience, who's been there. I might not have seen it all. And I got to tell them, I haven't been in every hotel in London. I've stayed in a few, but I do know at least the experiences in the right neighborhoods you should be in, and where is going to be the easiest way to get around on the tube and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where I sell myself.
Yeah, and it's even things when we were chatting and talking about how you were I was telling, so my partner is super into Lord of the Rings, like constantly quoting it, and I can't remember movies for the life of me, so I'm always missing references and different things. But it's things like, Rocky's talking about the fire ring. There's a fire ring scene, and you actually get to see the fire ring that is in the movie. And he was so excited when we were chatting that it was contagious.
It really is. It's just, and it's, I think when you stick to your niche and you stick to things, like I've heard on your podcast before about, you should travel someplace new every year, but you should also like reinforce your niche. And so like, yep, our plan is, I think, to go back to London again this year to do Harry Potter, because I've never seen it in the winter. And I need, the last time I went, I wasn't a travel agent. I was just, traveling to London for the third time. And but now I'm going with the emphasis of like learning a couple different new things. I want to try out some stuff that I've read about and I've booked clients with, and I want to get that experience. I want to take pictures. We're going to stay at a very wizarding themed hotel that has a couple rooms that are themed just for Harry Potter, and they do a great breakfast that's Harry Potter themed for kids. And so these are the things that I want to go and see and take pictures and see it in the winter time versus always having seen it in the summer and the spring. And so it allows me to go do that. But like going to New Zealand, I went the first time and I saw Lord of the Rings things, but I went the second time purposefully to make connections with people that I would be possibly selling travel to, or selling their travel to other people, and then seeing things that I had missed. And again, like you said, the potato scene from Lord of the Rings, going to the actual fire pit, you sell those fans of that movie and say, here's a picture on my phone. Like, look, you can see the actual fire ring. It's still there, years and years later, you can still go see it. And if that doesn't sell them on it, nothing probably will.
It's so true. So speaking of niches, because something that kind of surprised you is you started getting a bunch of people asking for anime, which you're not really into, but it's like the Venn diagram, and it seems like it overlaps with the audience that you're in. So you decided to start adding anime. You did some research. You took a trip to Japan, which to just kind of get a feel for things. And that's not cheap. So talk with us. What made you decide to take the leap into anime? Was it worth it for you? Like, what kind of signs were telling you, okay, this is something I should probably look at because my audience is very attracted to it?
Well, I think the beauty of these vendor events is that, and again, I keep coming back to it, but you're not, it's not a one-way conversation. It's a two-way conversation. People are asking you about things. They're asking, hey, or do you lead these trips, or do you do this? So you start listening for things like, do I need to start doing more group trips? Do I need to start doing?
I'd go on your trip, Rocky, just so you know. When you lead a trip, I'm going to be right there.
Yeah, I mean, come on, it's going to be fun. We're starting them. But like the one thing I kept hearing was anime, and I had never. It's one thing I didn't get into. I mean, I grew up with some of the smaller stuff in the early years, but it was never anything I got into. I was very fantasy related. Like that's my baby, is fantasy. But I kept hearing it, and I said, well, I don't want to leave this niche. I was like, I've always wanted to go to Japan. I was like, I want to sell Japan at some point because I love the samurai aspect. I was a big Shogun fan, and I read the book many years ago and was passionate about it. But I was like, let me go look in the anime. So I had so many people asking about anime. So I said, all right, I'm going to put together a trip. what the client sees versus what I do. You know, the client's going to see what they see, and they don't know that I, use points or miles, or I book it at the cheapest place ever and whatever. Like, they don't need to know that. And
Yeah.
but I just need the experience. And again, like I kept telling people, I won't book this until I've been there. And I am very thankful that I did that, because now after doing, I did quick, 8-9 days in Japan. I did the major things. I did, Tokyo, Kyoto, and Osaka. But it was, one, I got great pictures. Two, I learned a lot. When people come to me and ask about Japan, I'm like, for your trip, you're going to want to be in this area. You're going to want to be in this area. You don't want to be here because it's going to put you so far away from all this other stuff. Tea ceremonies and sushi making, and because people don't want to just go to these places just for the anime or just for Lord of the Rings or just for hair. They want to experience everything else, and you've got to have that well-roundedness to be able to sell them on the rest. Because I've noticed with all the fantasy stuff I sell, they're there for a part of it. I've had, I think, 1 or 2 diehard trips where it was all, it was all this all the time. But for the most part, it was, I want to see this, but I also want to see this. I want to take a part in a traditional samurai museum or something like this. And so it was really beneficial to do that. And I started thinking, like, these are what I call my little scouting trips. You go and you take pictures, and then when you feel comfortable, you sell them. And it was successful, because once I got back and started telling people, and I shared all my pictures on Facebook, and everybody's like, oh my gosh, like, this looks amazing. I shared it both on my personal page and my business page. People were really excited about it. And within 2 weeks, not within, but there was a 2-week span recently where I had 4 trips booked for Japan, all somewhat anime themed, or, something there, related to it. And, the first of those clients are actually leaving here in 2.5 weeks. So it's very quick turn. I mean, they're all leaving. 3 of the 4 clients are leaving within the next month and a half. And that all came back when I came back from Japan. But
cool.
It's just, I think it goes really important about, like, if you know it, you can sell it. And once you've been to Japan, and, like, again, I only scratched the surface of Japan, but I got enough. I went there with a different mindset when I traveled in the past, and was like, okay, I need to understand the districts in Japan. I need to understand where things are located. What is walking distance? What are the customs? What are the things? Where am I going to add value to my clients that they can't find online? And that's knowing the places to book them, where to book them, where to put them down, what experiences. I discovered Team Lab Planets in Japan because one of my friends who wants to go to Japan said, hey, you need to go to Team Lab Planets. I was like,
I don't know what
all
this
right,
is. What is it?
It is the most immersive art studio in the world. I almost skipped it. We almost skipped it. And my wife and I will say it was one of the coolest things we've ever done in our life. There's a water exhibit where you take your shoes and socks off, you put them in a locker, and you walk through water, and they have, like, lights that portray these, like, little fake koi fish going through the water. You go up it's just super immersive. It's like an interactive art museum, but it's, like, really interactive. Like, everything is meant to be touched, felt, seen.
Nice.
And so now I tell everybody on it. I'm like, you've got to go to this. And so, I mean, it's just this uniqueness about going on these trips and seeing these things.
It is. One of my old college roommates is from Japan, so I went and visited her maybe like 10 or 15 years ago. And I didn't plan anything. She planned our whole trip for us. But when we were in Kyoto, she took me to, like, I'd heard of the geishas, of course, but I hadn't heard of, I think they're called maikos, like they're geishas in training. And so we're in Kyoto. We have this nice lunch with soba noodles. Everything's going great. She's like, now we're going to go. And it was like in a basement, and it was where they do your hair. Like, so I ended up being dressed up like a Mako, but looked like a geisha to me. But I mean, it was okay. So I'm going to, as a bonus for everybody, I'm going to put a picture of me, of the pictures they took of me, because you barely even know it's me, at these studios. But everyone, like, first of all, I'm a giant in Japan, and, like, all the women are so tiny. And so there's this tiny little area for normal sized Americans, like, like with 20 different things, but they wrap you up so tightly I couldn't breathe, and they put this little like a hump on your head with like a wig, and they paint your face white, and then they're taking these pictures, and I'm not the most like delicate person in the world, and they're trying to get me to like hold this little parasol umbrella and this pretty way, and I kept getting it wrong, and there was a language barrier, but it was such a fun experience. But it's things like that when you go and you can experience them and then sell them, because I was like, it's hard to find clothes that fit in Japan, so I think that might be a limiting factor, but it's a really cool experience that I didn't even know existed until I went there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm going to link to this Team Lab Planets when I find it for everybody in the show notes, so you can find it there. Okay, so let's move into, I want to talk about scaling your business, because even though you just started a year and a half-ish ago, you've already got big dreams, Rocky. You've built this incredible brand. And one thing we haven't mentioned that I want to make sure to mention is you also have a matching Jeep, your black Jeep. And then how is it decorated?
Yeah, so it's a white Jeep with the black. I took the inverse of this logo that everyone can't see, but it's got my logo on the side of the door. And I put travel agency underneath of it just to make sure that everyone understands it's a travel agency. But my favorite part of it, the one that everybody loves, is there's the dragon. The dragon that I have on everything sits on the front of the hood. And so it's this, as you're seeing this white Jeep go down, there's this black dragon sitting on the hood, and it gets people thinking. They look at it, and it's got my website on the back. A little saying, turning imaginations into dream vacations on the side of the back of the vehicle, and the website going down the back quarter panel of the vehicle. $250 with a local guy. Guy did it all. He printed it. $250. I don't know how much marketing. You can see when you go to places and you see people stop and they're looking at your vehicle, and then you'll see like little hits on your website or on your Facebook. You might find like a new follower or a new follow on Instagram or something. You're like, okay,
it's working.
It worked. It got someone to look at it because they see it. They see the logo and they love the logo when they go. So yeah, it's the whole brand thing with that.
Yeah. And so one thing, I'm going to link to our article on tax write-offs for everybody. But if you're like leasing your vehicle or something along those lines, and you have it with your logo and different things on there, know that you can also write that off. But okay, so going back, you've kind of expanded into group travel, which I don't know if you started off with that in mind, but it kind of fell into your lap with the Sons and Daughters of Italy partnership. But now you're kind of thinking about doing group cruises that are like have like a big fantasy element to them. Chat with me more on that.
So the like going to the vendor events and you're hearing people talk, and they're like, I think a lot of people want to travel, but I think where they feel most comfortable is when their travel advisor is going with them. When they know like all I got to do is show up, and this person's going to make sure everything's taken care of. And I think I keep hearing that reoccurring theme. So one of the things I decided is like, I wanted to start expanding into groups because of that. And so I started off with quick wins. So Sons and Daughters of Italy, they were looking for, I'm Italian American, they were looking for a travel advisor who could help them with that. So I started out with some quick wins with doing these group trips, and they've become very successful for next year. We've got most of the slots sold for, both trips already. When one of them's a sole use bus in Sicily, so that's 44 slots. We've got 32 of 44 sold so far, and we still got we're still a year and a half out, I think, from that trip. But those were quick wins, and there were things I knew were going to sell. What I'm ready to start getting into is now the fantasy travel, like and that's going to take more logistics. But I want to do more of the group travel because I want people to feel like comfortable. Like Rocky's going to lead us. He's going to take us all the spots. This is what we want to do. And I think it really helps the business, expand, because it's so much easier to do, I think, group travel, I think sometimes. And it's what everyone markets towards. When you get to these, you talk to these suppliers, like they love you, but if you can sell them, if you can sell their groups, they're going to be hard. But for the fantasy related stuff, that's where it becomes difficult, is you have to find people who are willing to put together specific itineraries that don't already exist and do them for a group. And so that's where it's taking a little bit of time to get into that, because you have to, I mean, looking at New Zealand, having been to New Zealand a few times and doing Lord of the Rings stuff, it's a lot. And if you're going to give someone an immersive Lord of the Rings experience, it's going to be expensive probably. And it's going to require a lot of logistics, especially on a country that far away that's separated into two islands that have a ferry or a plane flight to get from one to the other. But you have to be on both to do a true Lord of the Rings experience because both islands are very iconic with the movie. So it's a lot of logistics. But I mean, I think my host agency offering group training in person was a really big thing that made me comfortable. Understanding attrition rates, understanding contracting. I think, it goes back to like, if you can do training to make yourself feel more comfortable with these things, it makes it easier to get into these spheres when you get over like, I'm not going to book a group. But I think there was a great session, trying to remember whose podcast it was, but somebody was like, come with me travel. It was one of the sessions someone had about a come with me travel training. And that was the one that sold it. They were like, you only got to put like 12 people together and you're going to go on this come with me trip. And ever since that, I've been like, okay, like I just need to do this. Like that's how I need to do this.
Yeah, there's a couple resources because like groups travel is something you definitely want to have some training in before you embark on it, because obviously if you mistake there, it's times 24 or 48 versus if you just do it for one person. So highly recommend it. But I'm going to link to the Travel Agent Chatter podcast episodes with people that do groups for tips on that. There's also a webinar with Jen Lee. She did Come With Me groups, and she breaks it down really, really well and is very inspirational. So if it's a seed that has been planted for you, but you're not sure how to make that sprout, check out those resources on our landing page. Okay, so let's see. Okay. I'm trying to think which question to ask first because, okay, let's start with, this is so visually exciting when you told me this. So a lot of people, when they think about their agencies, they always envision them staying remote. You have a different vision. You've spent so much time and energy building the core brand for Flights and Fables, because in the end, what your vision is having storefronts across the US in major cities. So tell us where this kind of rooted from, and then paint the picture because it's so fun.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about like one of my end states is I wanted to franchise this, and I think I tell people all the time, I'm brand first. Everything with me is about building my brand first. Hence, everything's got the logo on it. Everything's got the logo colors. It's all after the niche. It's all about brand first. And so when I was thinking about it, and I was like, you go to these old downtowns and like these quaint cities and like you see these like really like, I'm like, what is the things that pique my interest? And for me as a fantasy fan, I looked at the place with like the little rickety pub sign or something. And I thought to myself, like, I was in a little town called Southern Pines and I was looking at their stuff and I was like, man, I was like an old English style sign with the dragon on it and Flights and Fables on it. And I was like, that would be something people would stop. I was like, people would stop in and see that just to see what's going on. And then I thought about it and I was like, you put in Lord of the Rings inspired stuff and cutouts and movie stuff. I mean, like the world's your oyster when you do that. And so I thought about that and I went to another town up the road called, Benson. And I found an in-person travel agency that had a storefront and they had merchandise and themed stuff and a person working there who's just selling this stuff. And they said, hey, it's a weekend. The travel agents will be back on the weekday. I can help take your inquiry and stuff. But I was just so impressed by how the location was. And you're in the downtown, you don't have to worry about it being a destination. And I think that's where I think a lot of us, when we think about businesses, the affordability rate is going to be in a place that's going to be out where no one's going to. And I think when I think about travel agencies is you're not a destination place. No one's going to hop in the car on a Saturday 9 times out of 10 and say, hey, I'm going to head to Flights and Fables on Route 27 out in the middle of this field with this like one little building. No one's going to do that because it's not on their way to anything. It's not anything. But if you're in a downtown location that has a very older downtown and you're trying to do an older themed, pub style, old English, visual sign and stuff, and your window front's got, the Shire from Lord of the Rings or a wizard on it from Harry Potter or something, people are going to stop while they're shopping and they're going to go and say, what is this place? Let me go in and check this out. And the foot traffic is worth that. But again, it's going to be a minute before you get there, because downtown locations, as we all know, are going to be more expensive, and it's going to take a lot more to do that than to be out somewhere remote. So it's about, again, in the meantime, continually building the brand. And as the point comes, instead of just dumping my money back into myself, when that money comes in that I have it, I'm probably going to throw it into doing that, to then increase the business more. I think it's a chance I'm going to take. But I'm going to take the money and put it into the business, and the business hopefully will reward me with foot traffic and things like that. So that's the eventual hope. And then, the long-term goal would be, of course, to franchise at some point, to be successful enough to have one in major cities, or at least suburb areas, major cities, that people would be able to, that you get into those geographical regions.
I'm going to suggest to you, in Minneapolis, there's along the river, it's called St. Anthony Maiden. It has cobblestone streets and like old buildings. That might be an option for you, Rocky, in the future. So remember this.
I'm going to remember it. That sounds like what we're looking for.
Okay, so beyond this brick and mortar vision, something you're also doing is you're kind of, when you talked about the grand vision here, you also talked about hiring employees there rather than contractors. And that's, again, something that kind of goes against the grain. But you mentioned you want to make sure that you're paying good wages and giving commission opportunities on top of the salary. Why is all of this important to you? And what was your thought process behind it?
So it's one of the things that's not talked a lot about in the industry. Like, a lot of people tell you, like, by the time you start thinking about scaling, you're usually swamped, and you're like, I need someone to help me take this load, and like, I need someone to help me with this. But by that time, you're already swamped. And so if you're not thinking about it ahead of time, when the moment comes that you need it, it's not going to be the right time, or you're never going to feel like it's going to be the right time, because you're so busy. But you're like, when am I going to find time to train someone? When am I going to find time to decide if it's an IC versus this? And so going back to what we were talking about just, before this, was the brand. The brand is everything. And I want people to work for the brand. I want them to sell fantasy travel, or to sell, the parts of this that they feel comfortable with. And to me, I'm so passionate about just the connectivity with humans, that I want to make sure that I'm in the right place to hire someone on responsibly, to make sure they're earning not just a living wage, but that they enjoy being here, that they feel valued, that they have medical insurance covered by me. So that's why I won't take on anybody until I'm able to do all those things, and make sure that when they get hired on by me, I have the time to train them. They understand, like, a brand, like, this is what we're about. Like, this is how we're selling the business for this, is about these fantasy trips. It's got to be about this, and making sure that they are bought in on that. I mean, it's crazy at these vendor events, how many people come up and always ask me if I'm hiring, and I have a list.
Oh, really? Oh, that's so cool. I didn't know that.
I've got a list of people who, when the time comes, I'm going to put out a blanket, but I got a couple people I'm going to make sure I definitely send them a personalized email saying, hey, we're ready. But and I want to make sure I see independent contractor sub-agents, that's all fine, but I don't know. I feel like there's a certain thing about giving someone the ability to work, and to let someone, grow and develop in your brand and in your world, and taking care of them financially, helping them financially, and then sharing in the wins with them. Like, when they sell a $30,000 trip, sharing that win with them and saying, like, thank you. I mean, it helps our business, but like, here's your part of this. Like, you sold this, you completed this deal. Here's your part of this commission as a bonus. And then when fams come up, if they haven't been to a place, like, let's say they've been to Harry Potter, or they've been to maybe Game of Thrones in like Northern Ireland or Croatia, but they've never been to New Zealand, but they really have always wanted to. And a fam opportunity comes up, you send them on that. Say, hey, so you can sell New Zealand better, and you can sell Lord of the Rings. I'm going to send you on this fam opportunity, and you're going to go learn about all this stuff. And it's work, but it's also fun. And so that's how I envision being an employer in the future. Is I want to have employees who work for me, who love coming to work every day, because they're selling fantasy travel, they're well taken care of, and they're getting opportunities that they wouldn't get in other places.
I love that. Okay, so Let's touch on mentoring really quickly, because you and I had mentioned this before, and that for so many new advisors, they'll come in and they'll be looking for a formal mentor, and that's really difficult to find within the travel industry for most people. Because I know when people have asked me and sent me an email, will you be my mentor? I'm like, oh boy, like mentoring sounds so formal. Like, I don't know if I can commit once a week. Like, I just get really stressed out. And so a lot of times what happens is kind of like these more informal mentorships where it's a slow build. You kind of meet each other and you're asking questions over time. And then you're kind of like, oh, they're my mentor. They've really helped me through a lot of stuff. And I know that you have a mentor in the travel industry. So tell us kind of what your experience was, what your advice is for new advisors or even experienced advisors that are looking for a mentor, but perhaps don't want to scare anyone like myself with a more formal proposal.
I think the way it was for me, so like obviously there's not a lot of people who sell fantasy travel, but there are a lot of people who sell Europe and other places like this. And so through a lot of group events, both through the consortium with travel leaders and through, my host agency and a lot of in-person events, I found a person, she sells a lot of the same things that I sell. A little bit, it's definitely different, but we had a very similar mindset when it came to business. And so what it started out was just kind of picking their brain, just saying, hey, do you mind if after this event we can kind of connect? If I can shoot you an email every once in a while, just kind of ask you a question, and that's very not intimidating, for a person that's like, yeah, send me an email, especially how busy this person is. And so over time, I was able to send them an email or do a phone call, like, hey, do you mind if I call you about this? I got a really like a big issue. I'm wondering if I'm doing this correctly or something. And she did not hesitate in any way, shape, or form to do that. And so over time, what comes is like, it becomes a mentorship naturally over time. Like over time, I'd be like, hey, you sell a lot of X, Y, and Z. Like, who is a DMC you prefer? And she's like, well, if your client's budget is this, or if your client's budget is this, these are some of the ones I would recommend. And the more you connect, the more you do that, it just naturally forms into this mentorship where you just kind of call them a mentor. And it's just like, yeah, it's like, this person's like really my mentor. And I think I wish more people would do that and take people on. But again, it's like you did say, it's got to be organic, I think, in order for it to work correctly. I think this one just kind of completely worked out that we, had very similar business mindsets. We, were at a couple of group events or events together where we were able to just kind of talk and get to pick each other's brains. And that just really created this like foundation. And it's gotten to the point where we set time aside to do things. Like, so when I went to go revamp my process, when I just said, hey, I really need to relook at how I'm doing my process, we sat down on the phone for like an hour and a half, and I walked through every step of my process, and she gave me great pointers of areas where I could have had friction points or where I needed to probably look at doing something. But that's a year of time of knowing each other was when we were finally able to do that. But if you're in this for the long game, you're in it with these people for the long time of basically saying, hey, I'm going to spend time of building this and maturing this relationship of, mentorship. And so I attribute a lot of success to having someone who's willing to take a little extra time. And I would say to other travel agents who are seniors, like, if you run into a situation where a person's asking you, like, be open and receptive to being able to, even as busy as you are, that couple emails here and there or allowing a phone call every once in a while could definitely help, blossom someone's career from being something where they give up and just say, hey, I'm done with this. I'm not going to do this anymore. It's just I'm not making any money, to being wildly successful. And there you are, peers or, contemporaries doing this together.
Yep, exactly. I like kind of the piecemeal approach, because I think when you're trying to reach out to someone that's successful and busy and their time is limited, if you do your homework beforehand, because there's nothing more frustrating than someone not doing their homework and then wanting you to do it all for them. But you do your homework beforehand, you're asking a really good question, and it's a bite size so that the person reads it and is like, oh yeah, I can answer this. Instead of like, asking for the world in a formal mentorship, it's a lot easier if you're asking very specific things to build those relationships as you go.
Yeah. Like, who's your favorite insurance provider? Like, who do you use for most of your clients for this insurance? Or who is your DMC for this? Or I just made a mistake. Is this going to cost me something with this? Or what should I do? Like, really simple, like, not things that, and sometimes the calls will turn into a 30-minute call or an hour call because we'll just catch up about stuff. But it's mostly just like you said, little bite-sized chunks of like, hey, who's your insurance provider? Or what's your experience with this? And that helps tremendously.
Exactly. Okay, there's one area I forgot to ask you earlier because I got so excited. I jumped on to the next section. But I want to jump back really quick kind of to these partnerships that you've been building, because I know with the Chamber of Commerce, those relationships, I think it was the Chamber of Commerce that ended up giving you 4 different articles across like regional or state papers, all from this Chamber of Commerce. And you weren't even going after getting media coverage, and it happened. And so I'd love for you to kind of retell the story so that advisors listening in can be inspired and be like, wow, like this is what could happen, as I'm building, because sometimes it can feel like you're networking and not a whole lot is happening. But yeah, if you wouldn't mind sharing.
Yeah. So I was at the Chamber of Commerce event, and one of the major players of this is the editor of a magazine called Up and Coming Weekly, which is the entertainment magazine for this area. And it's available everywhere. People pick it up when they're standing in line for something, or at the grocery store, you pick it up just to see what's kind of going on in the area. And so he said, hey, I really want, I'd love to hear more about your business. And so he sent, one of his writers over, and they did a phone call interview with me and said, hey, she was very passionate about, this type of stuff. And she's like, hey, I really want to do an article, based upon his recommendation. I want to do an article on you. And so she writes this really great article about the business and the unique niche that we have. And then from there, the local business journal read it. And so this person was like, hey, I saw your article in this Up and Coming Weekly. I'd love to publish you in the business journal. And so now you're getting exposure in the entertainment, you're getting exposure in this business journal that where all the business, personalities in the area read or subscribe to. And then of course from there, the local newspaper, the actual newspaper for this area that is throughout the area picks up your story and says, hey, we want to interview you and do this whole article on you as well. So they're all told differently. It's the same story, but told through 3 different lenses based upon, each of the different writers' perspectives. But it was great because they were all passionate about this. Like, no one was there against their will. In fact, I was at one of my vendor events for one of the Geek and Grub events up in Raleigh. And I saw one of the person, I'd never met her in person. We'd only done the phone interview. And she's like, hey, I'm here at this event, but I saw, I finally got to see your, I see your tent. She's like, it's my chance to finally get to introduce myself in person. She's like, as you see, I go to these events regularly. So I am passionate about this. So I love your niche. And so it's just really cool. And then from there, Raleigh had a magazine called Voyager Raleigh, which is our 2nd largest city in the state. And so they picked up, wanted to do an interview. And in fact, they just sent me an email a couple of days ago saying, hey, we want to do a follow-up interview. We want to come back and do another interview with you. And just, so it's, it's just the networking, the in-person stuff that allows you these opportunities. And like I tell people this, whether you're doing this part-time or you're doing this full-time, you can still be a part of the Chamber of Commerce. Our Chamber of Commerce has a number of evening events that I go to, and I meet a lot of people at these evening events. But again, because I do this full-time, I'm able to go to some of our networking things that are during the day, during work days. But I credit a lot of my early success to being able to do in-person networking, in-person events, in-person everything, which has, I think, led to a lot of just random success of someone meeting you and saying, hey, I want to do an article, which leads to another article, which leads to another article, and leads to another article. 4 articles in, 6 months.
That's
I think.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Especially when you weren't trying. It's not like you were pitching people trying to pick up your story. But, if someone is looking to learn how to pitch journalists, one of our past episodes with Courtney Nichols, she does a ton of outreach for PR. We'll link to that for people. Let me see. And like Rocky, I feel like, you're great at networking. I think when I hear you talk, some of the things that stick out on what has made Flights and Fables take off so quickly is you have the strong brand. Your niche is very unique and pinpointed that it makes a great story. So for any writer, they're going to look at that and say, oh, that's such a unique, cool angle. I want to write about that. It's not like you're getting another like, oh, they opened up a laundromat on 26th in Lyndale Avenue. You know, they're like, oh, cool. Flights and Fables travel agency. So, and the other thing is you know what your strengths are. You know that those face-to-face events are where you're really going to shine. And that's where you've chosen to focus your marketing, which I think is super smart. And it goes to show with the success that you've been seeing for the last year and a half with how many bookings you've made. So yay, congrats. So excited for you.
Thank you.
Okay, so before we wrap up, we have our signature question we ask everybody every time, and that is indispensable. Like, what person, book, technology has been indispensable to the growth of your agency, and then tell us why.
You know, I knew you were going to ask this, and so I thought about it long and hard. And I will say, you know, if I had the leadership of my host agency, I think is what makes me successful. I can't really pinpoint any one person. So I have to say it's like literally the leadership team, because between the CEO's ability to talk business, like dive really deep into the business, every week we get an email about just the business side, and you're just like, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense. To the chief operating officer talking about marketing and branding, to the training people, to the group. I mean, like the leadership team, they do everything so well in their jobs that it makes you so much more, it makes it so much more successful in my business. Like I've taken something from each one of those people that it's been like just miraculous. Like I always feel like I have a whiteboard up in my office now, and I'm listening to them on their webinars that they're doing, that they do for us, that they put out for us as members. And I'm always taking something. And I'm like, I need to incorporate this. I don't know if it's gonna be today or tomorrow, but I need to incorporate this. And so, like, I know it's a cop out of an answer, but like the leadership team and how they each have a specialized lane has just been phenomenal. And I think like, I mean, I'm very confident I'm going to do very well in the future, just because if you're not confident, I mean, why should you? Are you sure you want to be in business? So I'm very confident I'm going to do well in the future, and I think in the end, I'm going to owe a lot of credit, one, to them, and two, to your website and your course. I mean, I tell every single person who's thinking about being a travel agent, like the first and foremost thing you should do is take that host agency review course, because that will be the determining factor, and that's your monetary commitment to being a travel agent. Much like we expect a person to give us $100 to $200 to book their travel. If you're serious about being a travel agent, you should be giving $100 to $200 to take this course, to make sure that this is the right fit for you before you drop X amount of time and X amount of dollars into this. So those are my two things. Like I think when I'm successful, I'm gonna look back and say, hey, these are the two things that got me to where I'm at today.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you for the kind words about HAR. It's the reason I love what I do, is because it's so fun to help other entrepreneurs. And you're talking about taking the tidbits from all these webinars you're listening to. And Shayna, our managing director, was just telling me the other day that she's implementing with the team a backlog. So when people come up with good ideas during meetings, we put it into this backlog, and then every month we'll, like, kind of based on what's going on at the company, be like, okay, do we have enough room on our plate to add any of this? If not, no, okay, we'll leave the backlog alone. But that way those ideas are like sitting in one place, ready for you whenever you have the time and the energy and when things are right.
Yeah.
Well, that is perfect. Rocky, thank you so much for your time and sharing your expertise.
Thank you. I appreciate you all having me on. It means a lot to me.
Yeah. And those, if you've listened to our podcast before, you know that I usually do a 1.5 to 2 hour interview with the person beforehand, just to really get to know their business. So with Rocky, I think it might have been a 2.5 hour call. And then this is a very long recording as well. So he has spent a ton of time chatting with us to share kind of his experiences. So an extra special thanks for that too.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank all of you for tuning in. We will be back for our Q3 Travel Agent Chatter podcast, coming sometime in Q3, possibly Q4, depending on how how behind I am on things, I should say. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and we will see you all next time. Thanks, Rocky.
Thank you. Bye.
In case you forgot, since this is possibly our longest ever episode, remember that you can read all of the transcript, you can view the show notes, you can watch a video of today's episode, you can listen to it all in one place, and that is by going to hostagencyreviews.com/TAC and clicking on episode 33 of everything you're looking for. And you know what else you can find on that magical landing page? A top secret link in the show notes where you can find some bonus items, including 1, a cute photo of me dressed as a Mako from my photo shoot in Japan, and 2, a behind the scenes photo of me during the interview, because right now it may look somewhat professional, but it won't surprise you that I have 3 dogs at my feet. But what may surprise you is I have a computer balanced on a footstool on top of a walker with the ring light tied to the cup holder. And I think that deserves some serious points for creativity. And lastly, to wrap things out, for those of you that have stuck around this long, which I really appreciate because we don't have any credits to keep going and saying who's helped out with our episode, here's some fun fantasy factoids about me. So my favorite fantasy author is Brandon Sanderson. My favorite series of his is Mistborn. And my sister and I have license plate frames with quotes from Brandon Sanderson's Stormlight Archive series on it. And I am still waiting for the day where someone honks excitedly or even knows what my license plate frame is. So don't forget that we have another listening delight for you on our podcast stream. Season 1 is our travel agent chatter, which comes out quarterly, and season 2 is our Friday 15s, which come out weekly. So you can tune in weekly to the Friday 15 podcast, where we answer your industry questions that you have submitted every Friday at 12 p.m. Central Time. You can sign up for emails with the questions that we will be answering ahead of time at hostagencyreviews.com/Friday15, or you can follow the link in the show notes. We'll see you all next time.